In my experience, this is the cause of most of the problems as to why a lawnmower will not start, particularly in the spring after it's had long winter storage. You're going to save yourself time and money. Hello and welcome. If your lawnmower was working well last season before you put it away for winter storage and then you bring it out in the spring and it just won't start, or it will start but only for a few moments and then it dies down like this, or it will start and it seems to be surging like this, what can possibly be wrong with it? Well, there's a few things it could be, so let's take a look. Well, first of all, is the engine turning over? Well, we know ours is because we've had attempts to start it already. But is there sufficient compression there? Can you feel the compression as you pull back on the starter cord? The chances are, though, that if the lawnmower was working well and had sufficient compression when it was stored away at the end of the year before, then it's unlikely to be a compression issue. And so the next thing I would quickly check is the spark plug. And so I'll pull off the cap, remove the plug and check the end. Does it look like there's a build-up of carbon or coke there, or is there any rust? And is there sufficient clearance between the ground electrode and the centre electrode? Just by eye, it's worth just taking a look to make sure that there isn't anything obvious there that would give a reason as to why this spark plug would fail. And that's because you need to determine whether you're using this spark plug again or having to fit a new one. And so whilst this particular spark plug is a little dirty, and that there is some rust build-up on the terminal, I can't definitely say that would stop it from working, so I'm going to give it a quick test to make sure. I realise that some might think it's easier just to fit a new plug, and maybe it will, but it might also be that you don't have one handy right now and you want to get on with your mowing. So showing you this quick test is just opening up options you can choose. But taking a look inside the spark plug cap there, we can see there's rust build-up, and this will have to be removed, but for now, doing the test, we'll put the plug back into the cap. And for this, the end of the plug, either the electrode or the threads, must be touching the engine body. And the contact between them needs to be as clean as possible, ideally bare metal. So it might well be that a little scrubbing with some sandpaper might be in order. OK, the spark plug might need holding in place here with some electrically insulated pliers, whilst making sure the operator safety handle is pressed so it doesn't stop the engine from turning. On this one, I've put a cable tie just to make it easier. And the best thing to do now is to get someone else to pull the starter pull cord. And when you look quite closely at the end of the plug, you should see a spark. And because this one looks okay, the spark looks intense enough, I'm going to use it again. But of course, if there's any doubt whatsoever as to whether the spark is any good or not, then it's always best to use a new plug. So for the sake of a few pounds, you know that the plug's okay and it's money well spent, because you may well need to replace the plug during the season at some time anyway. OK, so at least now we know that everything's OK with the sparking system, and so we've eliminated this as a potential problem. And at this point it might be tempting to try and restart the engine, but before we do, I would just take a look at one more thing. It's surprising how much dirt and debris can be accumulated inside the fuel tank over just one season. And so I personally, as the next step, would drain the fuel tank. Particularly if the lawnmower has been standing for a long period of time. Maybe over winter, or even just a few weeks, and the debris can be a mixture of dirt introduced when refilling the tank, and sometimes if the fuel's been standing for so long in there, it can start to go really thick at the bottom of the tank, and that's because gasoline fuel does degrade over time, and a lot of people would agree that it's only at its best for around 6 weeks. So in this case, it's always best to check the fuel and remove any bad fuel before it's drawn into the engine. You can see with my fuel that I've just drained here that there's lots of debris at the bottom, along with a lot of moisture. You can see a lot of globules of water down there. And those large reddy brown coloured pieces is fuel that's set hard over time, and it's become a substance very similar to that of dry flaky varnish. Needless to say, this would clog up the fuel pipes and all those little tiny holes inside the carburettor, and the engine just would not run right, if at all. But to be fair, this one is quite a dirty example, and it may not be this bad inside all lawnmowers, but you can see the benefits there of making sure you've got clean fuel inside your fuel tank. And in my experience, this is the cause of most of the problems as to why a lawnmower will not start, particularly in the spring after it's had long winter storage. And this is often overlooked by the general lawnmower owner. In fact, I can tell you that most of the lawnmowers that come to me for repair just need the fuel draining and fresh fuel putting in and running up. And if you can do this yourself, you're going to save yourself time and money. It's not rocket science, and a lot of the time this is what the repair centres are doing behind the scenes. Well, now we know that we may need to drain the fuel and replace it, what's the best way to do so? Well, sometimes, of course, some people turn the mower onto its side and drain it out of the filler. I personally tend not to do that, and one reason for that is I don't want the oil in the engine sump to tip towards the carburettor and fill it full of oil. But the main reason is I want to be a little more thorough with the cleaning, which you'll see shortly, particularly on this type of lawnmower engine. And so the way I would drain the fuel would be different depending on one of the two main types of lawnmower you may have. One may look like this, which is the carburettor attached to the fuel tank, and the other one would look more like this, where the carburettor is hanging lower and is separate from the fuel tank. And we'll take a look at this first. So on this type of lawnmower that has this type of carburettor with a float bowl, I like to remove the fuel pipe from the back of the carburettor and let the fuel drain out that way. And then I remove the float bowl of the carburettor and clean inside there as well. This one is 2 small bolts, it needs a 7mm spanner. But what size spanner you'll need to remove these do vary between brands. But once I've removed the bowl and you take a look inside, you can see that it was well worth taking off. For a start, the fuel coming out of here will most likely be stale if it's been standing. Secondly, if we take a look at the fuel anyway, you can see that big globule of water. If we'd tried to start the engine, of course, without first cleaning the carb bowl, then this would have all been sucked up into the engine and caused further problems anyway. The chances are it just wouldn't start. So now we've got the stale fuel out of both the tank and the carburettor, we can refit the carb bowl. And when we fix the bowl back in place, I place the fuel pipe back onto the back of the carburettor. But if your engine has this type of fuel tank and carburettor setup, then I personally like to remove the fuel tank and carburettor all in one. In my opinion, these are really good engines, but in 90% of the time it's the diaphragms that let them down. The good news is it's generally only that lets them down. These engines are quite reliable and long lasting other than the diaphragms. So if you know your lawnmower hasn't had one of these diaphragms for quite a number of years, or it's been standing for a long period of time with stale fuel, then it's best just to change the diaphragm. For the sake of a few pounds, you may as well put the diaphragm in and know it's okay, because the chances are it'll soon need one anyway. So in my opinion, in this scenario, you're not wasting money or time doing this. It's a good investment to the well workings of your lawnmower throughout the season. They come in a kit like this with the diaphragm and the gasket, and should you need one, there is an Amazon link down below in the description that will take you right to it. There's also a link down there next to it that takes you to a video where I show you step by step how to replace these diaphragms. I've made it nice and easy to follow and understand, so please do check that out as well if you need to. However, if you would rather have a free printable download leaflet, then there's a link down there to that as well. The link goes directly onto my website where you can download a copy of this, as I've said, absolutely free. The download is an easy to follow step-by-step instruction on how to replace these diaphragms. And the best part about that is you haven't got to take your computer or your laptop or your iPad into the workshop with you. You can print off the download and take that in and work from the sheet in your own time. And so now I want to thank you so much for watching this video. Please give me a like and subscribe if you haven't done already. Thank you for watching.